Good morning, good afternoon, and greetings from wherever you may be from around the world. I will be making a weekly outlook video on what I'm expecting in the coming week and a little bit of what has happened in the past week. So as we do, we start off with the dollar index. On the weekly chart of the dollar index, we have officially closed above this weekly sell side imbalance that we've been paying attention to for a while. At this point here, on the 1st of January, we traded into it, and I wanted to see if we would see a lower time frame confirmation to take it back down to this sell side liquidity and this sell side liquidity, but we failed to do that. And now that we've closed above it, I am leaning more towards bullish prices. I'm looking to see if we could get to these relative equal highs, and it's going to be more visible going down on a daily chart. So because we've closed above this weekly sell side imbalance, I will now look to see if we could find some measure of support in this PDRA for higher prices. Of course, nothing is stopping it from trading back down and closing below the CB and using it as resistance, as it should have been for lower prices. So going down to the daily chart, we have this sort of market maker sell and buy model situation without an original consolidation, because I would not call this a consolidation. We didn't really chop around, even though yes, it was choppy price action, but I'm looking to see if we could target that high. Of course, the relative equal highs that I was mentioning from a weekly perspective were these ones. So this would be the first target, and that's the next one. I'm looking to see if we could trade into this inefficiency on a daily time frame, which also aligns with the weekly sell side imbalance. That's now obviously a weekly inversion fair value gap. So let's label that appropriately to make sure that we are following. So I'm looking to see if we could take out Thursday's low from last week and trade into this daily inefficiency. So anywhere inside of this, I'm looking to see if we could get the low of week and a continuation to the upside, and that be my target 104.557 on the dollar index. So that's what I'm looking for going into the week on the dollar index. So now moving on to the pair that I've chosen to trade for this week is the Aussie AUDUSD. So on the Aussie, already we can see on the weekly chart that we have this order block here, this bullish order block on a daily chart, right? I mean on a weekly chart. Let's actually use the replay button to make it a little bit easier to see. So on a weekly time frame, we rejected off of this buy side imbalance, this little fair value gap in the form of a buy side imbalance, and I saw we had these relative equal highs residing at that point. So let's just call this buy side liquidity at 0.69051 level, and we had price printed itself over time, and we continued pressing higher without clearing the liquidity residing up there. So at this point, we are now trading into this buy side imbalance, right? If we are bullish, if we are going to remain bullish, we would expect price to push up from here to clear that buy side liquidity. So let's see how price plays out. Well, firstly, we closed below the buy side imbalance, because if you noticed, there is a low of the buy side imbalance, and we can see that the candle closed below it. Secondly, we tested into the bullish order block because we came from a fair value gap, so I'd consider this to be a bullish order block. We traded into it, so there's still a little bit of hope that we may push up. As long as we can close above this buy side imbalance, pull it out in time. If we could close above this, then there's a chance we'll push up to the target there. So let's see how price plays out. And we can see we traded very deep into this order block. We actually took the low of this order block, because if we look up there, the open, high, low, close. So if we see the check there to see the low of the candle, this candle's low is 0.65256, and then the candle that we just created now, the low is 0.65251. so literally a 7 pip difference. Probably not even going to be recognizable by some brokers, and probably going to be basically equal lows by other brokers. So I'm paying attention to those equal lows. They look a bit too clean for me, and when I go down to the daily time frame, I notice that we have a sell side imbalance, right? We have a CB residing there, as well as an inversion fair value gap, because at some point in the past I wanted to see if there was a possibility that we could use this area, this BC, as support for higher prices, but we never did come back to it. And when now we've broken below it, we could see it act as a resistance to push lower into the equal lows. But I'm not going to be the person blindly selling the Aussie or blindly buying the dollar. I would rather wait for liquidity to be swept and then a lower time frame confirmation to take it. So right now I'm sitting on my hands. I'm not really going to be doing anything until or unless I get a 15 minutes confirmation or a 1 hour time frame confirmation. We also have this low resistance liquidity run, a trend line that's sort of building up here, and we could find price quickly running through it. So I'll keep an eye out on this to see how everything pans out here. Let's move on to the next one. I am not going to be touching euro dollar and pound dollar this week, and the reason is simple. We are in an extremely consolidating market. Of course, euro has tried to straighten up and be a little bit cleaner by looking similar to the dollar index, and the pound as well is doing the same, but again, very choppy price action. I would not want to participate in this condition at all. So I'm looking to see what the euro does going into next week, but this is not my top priority because I'm focused more on the Aussie, and I would have said the Kiwi as well, but mostly the Aussie. So I'm going to once again be trading exotic pairs or cross pairs. But before we go into that, let me stop by gold quickly. On a few previous videos, I was paying attention to this sell side liquidity here, 1972, and if we traded lower than that, we have these relative equal lows. So I was looking for more selling opportunities on gold, and especially now that we're going to have, now that I'm expecting higher dollar, and if we do have higher dollar, then gold should follow from here. So I'm paying very close attention to gold, and if we have a lower time frame confirmation, which we did here at this point, market structure shift happened there at the 15 minutes. So, and this is actually after rejecting from the consequent encroachment of the daily, I believe the daily CB. Yeah, the daily CB, and of course we came here, continuation after rejection from there. So I'm expecting lower prices on gold, and I'm expecting that we may not see a high of week higher than this high right now. So I'm expecting a continuation to the downside, and as of course, as I mentioned, we have low resistance liquidity run over there, basically a trend line. I'm focusing more on these three touches on the trend line, but let's label that appropriately as well. And that's how we have a somewhat of a trend line. So I'm looking to see if we could break this aggressively by rejecting from where we are right now. So let's move on to GBPJPY. This is the only cross pair that I'll be trading this week. But let's start off again as usual from a higher time frame chart. On a monthly chart, to me, it just looks like we're going for this buy side liquidity. I'm not sure what's going to happen after that, but it looks like we're going there. So when I zoomed in a little bit more by going to the weekly chart, I realized that we have this CB, this sell side imbalance that we were trading into last week. Let's use replay mode again so it makes a little bit of sense. So we have this inefficiency, and we perfectly filled it up actually, and then rejected from it, but we did not get the lower time frame confirmation or lower time frame market structure shift for us to be confident in it. And the reason I say lower time frame is because I checked on the 1 hour and you can see price just kept climbing up. So going into next week, I'm looking to see if we can find support inside of this specific daily buy side imbalance, because the inversion is essentially in this area where this other block is, and I'm not looking for us to trade it back into this area again. And I would actually have my invalidation point below these two bearish candles, and of course the target, as I mentioned, is up there. So that's what I'm looking for on GBPJPY. Just tap, lower time frame confirmation, and continuation to the upside. Let's move on to the indices. Starting off with the NASDAQ on a monthly chart. That was actually something that I found interesting on this chart. So firstly, we rejected off of a buy side imbalance. Let me switch on my magnet. We tapped off of a BC and rejected higher, but something I found particularly interesting and got reminded of is an immediate rebalance at this point. So we essentially opened up this month in January, traded lower, immediately rebalanced from here, and that makes sense why there was a speed in proportion. There was a speed in the trade. I'm probably going to link up a few videos from ICT where he talks about immediate rebalances. So going down to the weekly chart, we can clearly see how we dipped down into discount, rallied higher, came back to this fair value gap, and now rejecting higher. This was where the immediate rebalance happened, so reaction was very quick on it. On a daily time frame, similar situation. We failed to close below this daily fair value gaps consequence encroachment. We didn't trade below. We didn't trade and close below the daily fair value gap. So what am I looking for going into next week? I'm still looking for higher prices until being told otherwise. So I'm looking for the low of week to be formed somewhere inside of this day 4-hour BC. This is, of course, if we are still going to be bullish, which I believe we are. And then you might ask what the targets are going to be. That's where fib projections come in. So I'm going to measure from the swing high and swing low that broke a new high. I rarely use this tool, but we'll see. So I use from there to there, and then 2 standard deviations is at that point, which is basically rounding up to 18,000 big figure number. For those that are curious to know what settings I'm using, these are my settings on the fib. And when we enable the 1.5, we can see it's the low hanging fruit at 17,580.75. And then of course, if we're looking for higher targets from there, like the 2 standard deviations and all those things. But this is what I'm looking for. Looking for 18,000 on the NASDAQ. So low of week found inside of this buy side imbalance, and then a continuation to the upside. Similar applies to, actually not just similar, the exact same thing applies to the E-mini S&P 500. So I'm not going to go into this too much, but I'm still going to repeat for completion's sake. On the daily chart, we traded from a discount PDRA, rejected fast from it, and for our, let's see, for our we have the exact same concept. We trade down into this and then continue pushing higher. I'm expecting Monday to be choppy because we do not have any news events, but on Tuesday we might tap into this or even the oil block before a continuation to the upside. The only reason I don't want any of these down here is because I believe this is a balanced price range. We have equally gone up as much as we have come down, but anything else above it is uncharted territory. So I believe that we still can trade into this to continue higher, but not back down to any of these bullish PDRAs this side. So that's something that I'm looking for on the E-mini S&P 500. And then the last one, I believe, yeah, the last one that I'm paying attention to is oil. Despite the choppiness of this chart, despite how messy it is, we have not gotten a buy side imbalance in a while, and last week we just got one at that point. So I'm telling myself to keep an eye out on this. I'm not going to essentially trade it aggressively, but I'm just going to keep an eye out on it. And if I'm going to trade it, I'm going to be taking the nearest hanging fruit, the lowest hanging fruit, which would be this buy side liquidity, the swing high. So we'll see how the market opens. We'll see if there's any lower time frame confirmation setups and everything to take us all the way back up to that high. I believe that's all I have for now. Stay safe, good luck, and good trading.